Ajoke stood silently behind the faded curtain of her small window, her heart heavy with an unsettling mix of sadness and jealousy. Outside, the sounds of laughter echoed through the compound as Atika's children chased each other, their carefree joy filling the air. Each burst of laughter was a painful reminder of what Ajoke longed for but could not have. She gripped the curtain tighter, her knuckles turning white as she watched Atika sit on a mat, surrounded by her 5 children, their faces glowing with happiness. Ajoke and Atika had once shared everything. From the moment they were children, they were inseparable, sharing dreams, secrets, and hopes for the future. Their bond had been unbreakable, a sisterhood forged through years of mutual support and love. But now, as adults and neighbors, their paths had diverged. Atika's life seemed perfect, blessed with a loving husband, a bustling household, and, most painfully for Ajoke, a growing family. The seed of jealousy had been planted deep within Ajoke's heart the day Atika gave birth to her first child. Over the years, as Atika welcomed more children, that seed grew into a thorny vine, choking out the warmth that once defined their friendship. Ajoke tried to mask her pain with forced smiles and polite conversation, but deep inside, the bitterness festered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the compound, Atika's youngest daughter suddenly fell ill. Panic gripped Atika as she bundled the child in her arms and rushed to the nearest hospital. Her husband was away on a business trip, leaving her to manage everything on her own. Before leaving, she hurried over to Ajoke's house, knocking urgently on the door. "Ajoke, please," Atika pleaded, her voice trembling with worry. "I need to take my daughter to the hospital. Can you help me with something? If I don't return tonight, please take in the clothes from the line and check on the other children." Ajoke nodded, a hollow smile on her lips, but her heart was far from compassionate. As Atika disappeared into the night, Ajoke stood in her doorway, the evening breeze brushing against her face. She glanced at the line of clothes fluttering in the wind, a sinister thought creeping into her mind. The old belief in their community whispered to her, a warning about leaving clothes outside overnight. Spirits or supernatural forces could inhabit the garments, bringing misfortune to those who wore them. A wicked smile curled on Ajoke's lips as she shut her door, ignoring Atika's request. "Let the spirits do their worst," she muttered, a twisted satisfaction taking hold of her. Throughout the night, Ajoke found herself restless, her mind racing with dark thoughts. She imagined the chaos that might unfold if the spirits indeed visited Atika's clothes. Perhaps this was the punishment Atika deserved for having so much while she, Ajoke, remained childless and alone. The hours dragged on, filled with anticipation and a perverse hope for disaster. The next morning, Ajoke hurried to her window, her heart pounding with both fear and expectation. To her dismay, the clothes hung untouched, swaying gently in the morning breeze. There was no sign of the supernatural, no calamity befalling Atika or her children. The realization left a bitter taste in Ajoke's mouth. Her jealousy had driven her to wish harm upon her closest friend, yet the universe seemed to shield Atika from her ill will. As Atika returned home later that day, weary but relieved, Ajoke watched her from the shadows. Her friend's resilience and unwavering faith were like a shield, protecting her from the envy that sought to consume them both. Ajoke's heart grew heavier, her inner darkness deepening as she realized that her malicious hopes had failed to bring her any solace or satisfaction. The laughter of Atika's children echoed once more, a cruel reminder of the happiness that eluded Ajoke. She turned away from the window, retreating into the solitude of her home, her spirit burdened by the weight of her own envy and regret. Atika returned home the next morning, her body weary from the night spent at the hospital and her heart heavy with worry for her youngest daughter, who had been admitted for further treatment. As she stepped into the compound, she expected to find some semblance of normalcy, a comforting sign that her trusted friend, Ajoke, had taken care of things in her absence. But what she saw instead filled her with shock and dismay. Her clothes still hung limply on the line, untouched, exactly as she had left them. The thought of the night spirits possibly inhabiting them sent a shiver down her spine. Ignoring the clothes for the moment, Atika rushed inside, only to be met with a heart-wrenching sight. Her children were scattered across the living room, their faces pale with hunger, some lying on the floor, others slumped over the chairs. Their usual lively spirits were dampened by exhaustion. The sight of her children in such a state, abandoned and uncared for, ignited a flame of anger within Atika. Her frustration turned quickly to Ajoke. She stormed over to her friend's house, pounding on the door with a force fueled by rage and betrayal. When Ajoke finally opened the door, her expression was indifferent, her eyes void of the warmth that once characterized their friendship. Ajoke, Atika started, her voice trembling, "I asked you for help. I needed you to take care of my children and bring in my clothes, but you did nothing. How could you?" Ajoke's face remained cold as she crossed her arms. "I didn't ask you to leave your children and your clothes, Atika," she retorted, her voice laced with bitterness. "You should have known better than to rely on others for what is your responsibility." Atika was taken aback by the sharpness of her friend's words. "But we are friends, Ajoke. We've always helped each other. Why would you turn your back on me now, when I needed you the most?" Ajoke scoffed, a mocking smile playing on her lips. "Friends? Is that what we still are, Atika? It seems you have everything now, the perfect family, the noisy children, the husband who still loves you. What do I have? Just an empty house and a husband who doesn't even look at me the same way anymore." The words hit Atika like a slap. She had never fully realized the depth of Ajoke's pain or the extent of her envy. "I never meant to hurt you, Ajoke," Atika whispered, her anger softening into sadness. "I thought we were in this together." Ajoke's eyes flashed with resentment. "Together? No, Atika. You moved on without me, leaving me behind with nothing but your shadow to remind me of what I don't have." Atika's heart ached at the realization of how far apart they had grown. The bond that had once been their strength was now a chasm, filled with misunderstandings and unspoken jealousy. "Ajoke, we can fix this." "We can." But Ajoke cut her off, her voice rising with emotion. "Fix what? You can't fix a broken heart, Atika. You have your prayers, your faith, and your children. What do I have?" The conversation ended with those harsh words hanging in the air, a stark reminder of the irreversible damage their friendship had suffered. As Atika walked back to her house, her steps heavy, she knew that the trust and love they once shared had crumbled beyond repair. The rift between them was now too wide, too deep to bridge. And with each passing day, the silence between them grew, filled with unspoken sorrow and regrets that neither could bring themselves to voice. Ajoke's heart, once filled with the joy of friendship, had grown cold and bitter. The sight of Atika's children playing in the compound only deepened her sense of inadequacy and isolation. Her husband's distant demeanor and the whispers of neighbors, who called other men father while he remained childless, became unbearable reminders of her perceived failure. Her envy toward Atika, who seemed to be blessed with everything she longed for, consumed her every thought. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ajoke sat in her dimly lit living room, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't bear the weight of her sadness any longer. In her desperation, she confided in a friend about her struggles, hoping for some solace or advice. Her friend, known for her connections to the village's spiritual world, suggested a visit to a renowned native doctor who was believed to have the power to change fates. Encouraged by this glimmer of hope, Ajoke decided to visit the native doctor the very next day. The journey to the doctor's remote hut was long and filled with uncertainty, but Ajoke's desperation fueled her resolve. She arrived at the hut, surrounded by towering trees and the eerie silence of the forest. The native doctor, an elderly man with a wise yet stern demeanor, welcomed her inside. Ajoke poured out her heart, sharing her pain, her jealousy, and her deep desire to have children. She hoped the native doctor could offer a solution, a ritual, or a potion that would bless her womb. The native doctor listened intently, nodding occasionally but remaining silent for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with wisdom and warning. "Ajoke," he began, "your heart is clouded with envy and bitterness, and such emotions can darken even the brightest soul. You seek a remedy for your childlessness, but the path you are choosing is fraught with danger. To tamper with the natural order through unnatural means can bring about unintended consequences. Are you prepared for what may come?" Ajoke, blinded by her longing and resentment, dismissed his cautionary words. "I am ready," she declared, her voice trembling but resolute. "I will do whatever it takes to have children, no matter the cost." The native doctor sighed deeply and then instructed her on the rituals she needed to perform. He handed her a small, intricately carved wooden box filled with herbs and powders, along with strict instructions on how to use them. Ajoke left the hut, clutching the box to her chest, convinced that her prayers were about to be answered. Back home, she performed the rituals exactly as the native doctor had prescribed, waiting anxiously for the results. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no sign of pregnancy. Meanwhile, Atika continued her life as usual, her home filled with the laughter and chatter of her children, her faith unwavering despite the hardships she faced. One night, Ajoke's jealousy reached its peak. Unable to contain her frustration, she stared out her window, watching Atika's children play in the moonlight. Her anger boiled over, and she muttered curses under her breath, hoping that misfortune would finally strike her friend. But Atika's prayers and deep spirituality created a protective shield around her family, unknowingly repelling any negative forces directed their way. As the months passed, Ajoke's actions began to backfire. Instead of finding peace, she grew more restless, her health deteriorating from the stress and the dark energy she had invited into her life. Her husband, noticing the change in her, grew even more distant, and the isolation she felt intensified. One fateful day, Ajoke fell gravely ill, her body weakened by the spiritual and emotional turmoil she had endured. In her moments of weakness, she realized the error of her ways. The rituals she had performed, the envy she had harbored, and the ill will she had directed toward Atika had only brought harm to herself. She understood, finally, that true fulfillment could not come from harming others or seeking shortcuts in life. Ajoke, humbled and broken, sought Atika's forgiveness. She confessed her actions and the darkness she had allowed to consume her. Atika, with a heart full of compassion and the strength of her faith, forgave Ajoke, understanding the depth of her friend's pain. She prayed for Ajoke's healing, and in time, the bond between them began to mend, though it was forever changed by the trials they had endured. In the end, Ajoke learned that the path to healing and happiness lay not in envy or supernatural intervention, but in self-acceptance, humility, and the power of genuine friendship.